You notice it first as a tickle in your throat. Nothing concerning, really. Just a slight irritation that makes you clear your voice once, then twice. The air on this forsaken manufacturing world has always been thick with industrial particulates, and you have long since grown accustomed to the gritty taste of metal dust on your tongue. This feels different though, wetter, heavier. You dismiss it. The 12-hour shift at the plasma coil assembly line demands your focus, and you cannot afford to appear weak before the overseers. Weakness invites scrutiny, and scrutiny invites punishment. You have witnessed what happens to those who falter in their duties. The recycling vats never discriminate between the living and the dead. The tickle persists throughout the morning cycle. By the time the midday nutrient distribution arrives, you find yourself swallowing more frequently, trying to dislodge whatever obstruction has settled in your airway. The protein paste tastes wrong today, metallic and faintly sweet in a way that turns your stomach. You force it down anyway. Starvation is a slower death than the overseer's shock maul, but no less certain. Around you, your fellow labourers consume their rations with mechanical efficiency, eyes hollow and focused on nothing. You wonder, briefly, if any of them feel the same wrongness settling into their flesh. The afternoon brings the first hint of fever. Sweat beads on your forehead despite the manufacturer's controlled temperature, and your hands tremble as you guide the plasma coils into their housing. Twice you fumble the delicate procedure, earning harsh rebuke from the shift supervisor. The tremor in your fingers refuses to still. You clench your fists until the knuckles whiten, willing the weakness away through sheer determination. It does not work. By the 16th hour, your entire body feels as though it is burning from within, a deep and invasive heat that has nothing to do with the forges blazing in the adjacent sector. When the shift finally ends and you return to your hab block, you notice the lesion. It sits on your left forearm just above the wrist, no larger than your thumbnail. The skin around it has taken on a pallid greyish hue that contrasts sharply with your normal complexion. You press your finger against it experimentally and immediately regret the decision. The flesh feels soft, almost gelatinous beneath the pressure, and when you remove your hand, the indentation remains for several seconds before slowly filling back in. A bead of yellowish fluid wells up from the centre, thick and viscous, carrying with it a smell that makes your gorge rise. You wash the area thoroughly with the harsh industrial solvent that passes for soap in the lower hive, scrubbing until the skin around the lesion turns angry red. The spot itself remains unchanged, a small island of wrongness on your arm. You wrap it in a strip of clean cloth torn from your only spare undershirt, hiding the evidence from yourself as much as from any potential observers. The Emperor protects, you tell yourself. This is nothing. A minor infection, easily fought off by a body strengthened through hard labour and devotion to duty. Sleep does not come easily that night. The fever has intensified, alternating between bone-chilling cold and suffocating heat that leaves your thin mattress soaked with perspiration. Your dreams, when they finally arrive, are strange and unsettling. You stand in a vast garden, lush and overgrown with vegetation you do not recognise. The plants grow with grotesque vigour, their leaves broad and waxy, their flowers massive and bloated. The air is thick with the scent of rot and new growth intermingled, sweet and putrid in equal measure. Somewhere in the distance something laughs, a deep and jovial sound that vibrates through your chest. You wake before the morning klaxon, disoriented and nauseous. The lesion on your arm has grown. It is now twice the size it was last night, and the greyish discoloration has spread outward in delicate web-like patterns that trace the pathways of your veins. When you unwrap the makeshift bandage, you find that the fluid has soaked through the fabric, staining it a dark greenish yellow. The smell is worse, carrying notes of decay that seem impossible from such a small wound. You rewrap it hastily, using the last of your spare cloth and dress for the day's shift with hands that shake for reasons beyond simple fever. The second day is when you begin to understand that something is truly wrong. The tickle in your throat has evolved into a persistent cough, wet and productive, bringing up thick ropes of phlegm that cling to your lips. Your co-workers notice, their hollow eyes flickering toward you with a mixture of fear and disgust. One of them, a woman whose name you have never learned, moves her station slightly away from yours. You do not blame her. In the lower hive, disease spreads faster than fire, and those who show symptoms are often dealt with preemptively. You have seen the quarantine teams at work, their sealed suits and flamers making quick work of entire hab blocks when plague threatens to spread. By midday, you can no longer hide the tremor in your hands. The plasma coils slip from your grasp repeatedly, and the shift supervisor approaches with his shock maul drawn. You expect punishment, perhaps even termination in the most permanent sense. Instead, he stops 2 meters away, his face twisting with revulsion beneath his rebreather. He sees something in you that makes him hesitate, some sign of contamination that overrides even his duty to maintain production quotas. He barks an order, and you are removed from the line, escorted by 2 servitors whose dead eyes register no fear, no disgust, only the imperative to obey. They take you to the medical station, a cramped facility that reeks of counterseptic and fear. The medici on duty is old, her augmetic eye whirring as it focuses on your face. She does not speak, merely gestures for you to bare your arm. When you unwrap the bandage, she goes very still. The lesion has spread dramatically. What began as a thumbnail-sized spot now covers most of your forearm, the skin sloughing away in places to reveal the corrupted flesh beneath. The greyish-green discoloration extends past your elbow, and when you move your fingers, you can feel something shifting beneath the skin, a subtle writhing that has nothing to do with your muscles or tendons. The medici's face drains of colour. She backs away slowly, her hand moving toward the emergency vox on her belt. You understand her fear. You have heard the stories of plague outbreaks, of entire manufactorums sealed and purged with viral fire to prevent contamination from spreading. You open your mouth to plead, to explain that it is nothing serious, just a minor infection, but all that emerges is a wet, gurgling cough that spatters the front of your overalls with greenish mucus. The medici's hand closes around the vox, and you know your time is running out. Before she can trigger the alert, the lights flicker and die. The manufactorum's power systems have always been temperamental, subject to brownouts and failures that the tech priests blame on insufficient maintenance rituals. This time, the darkness feels different. It presses against you, thick and suffocating, carrying with it that same sweet rot smell from your dreams. In the blackness, you hear something moving, something that breathes with a wet, laboured sound that makes your skin crawl. The medici screams, a high and terrified sound that cuts off abruptly. When the lights return seconds later, she is gone. Only her rebreather remains, lying on the floor in a pool of something dark and viscous. You run. Rational thought has fled, replaced by pure animal panic that drives you out of the medical station and into the corridors beyond. The manufactorum stretches around you in all directions, a maze of industrial passages and forgotten spaces that you navigate through instinct alone. Behind you, alarms begin to wail, and you hear the heavy tread of the security servitors deploying to seal the sector. You do not look back. You cannot. The thing that moves in the darkness is still there. You can feel it, keeping pace with you just beyond the edge of perception. You find refuge in a forgotten maintenance tunnel, sealed decades ago, and marked with faded warnings about structural instability. The lock yields to a few desperate kicks, and you squeeze through the narrow opening, pulling it closed behind you. The darkness here is absolute, broken only by the faint bioluminescent fungi that grow in patches along the walls. You collapse against the cold metal, gasping for breath, and realize with growing horror that the act of breathing has become difficult. Each inhalation feels incomplete, as though your lungs can no longer fully expand. When you cough, the sound echoes wetly in the confined space, and you taste copper and rot. The third day dawns, though you have no way of knowing it in the lightless tunnel. Your internal chronometer has failed along with everything else, time stretching and compressing in ways that feel wrong. The fever has reached a crescendo, baking you from the inside until you can barely think through the haze of heat. Your arm, the one with the original lesion, has swollen to nearly twice its normal size. The skin has taken on a mottled, pustulant quality, covered in dozens of new lesions that weep constantly. The fluid they produce has changed consistency, thickening into something almost tar-like that clings to your flesh and clothing. You examine the damage as best you can in the dim fungal light. What you see defies comprehension. The lesions are not simply wounds or infections in any conventional sense. They move. Beneath the corrupted skin you can see things squirming, tiny writhing forms that press against the tissue as though seeking escape. When you touch one of the larger pustules, it ruptures with a wet pop, disgorging a mass of what look like maggots. But maggots do not laugh, do not sing in tiny chittering voices that speak words you almost recognize. These do. The pain should be unbearable. Logic suggests that the degree of corruption spreading through your body should have you screaming, unconscious, or dead. Instead, you feel a strange sort of numbness, not the absence of sensation, but rather a disconnect between what you see happening to your flesh and what you actually experience. The fever continues to rage, yes, and your body feels heavy and wrong, but the agony you expect never arrives. If anything, there is almost a sense of relief, as though some great pressure has been released. Your thoughts begin to wander. You remember the garden from your dreams, how lush and alive it felt despite the rot. You wonder if such a place truly exists, if somewhere beyond the manufacturum's corroded walls there is life that does not require constant struggle, constant sacrifice. The thought brings with it a wave of unexpected emotion. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. A sense that perhaps suffering is not the only constant in this universe. The idea feels dangerous, heretical even, but you cannot seem to push it away. By what you estimate to be the end of the third day, you have stopped trying to hide the corruption. Your entire left arm has transformed into something that barely resembles human anatomy. The flesh has bloated and distended, splitting in places to reveal a pale, fungoid growth beneath. The bone structure seems different, softer and more pliable, and when you flex your fingers, you feel joints moving in ways they should not. The discoloration has spread to your chest and neck, visible even through your clothing as a network of dark veins that pulse with irregular rhythm. Most disturbing is what has happened to your throat. The coughing has finally subsided, but not because your respiratory system has healed. Rather, it feels as though your lungs have adapted, accepting the corruption as their new normal. When you breathe now, you can hear a faint whistling sound, and occasionally you feel something moving in your chest, shifting and settling with each inhalation. You try not to think about what that might mean. The hunger arrives suddenly and with overwhelming intensity, not for food in any conventional sense, but for something else, something you cannot name. Your mouth fills with thick saliva that tastes of sweetness and decay, and you find yourself gnawing on your own corrupted arm without conscious decision. The flesh tears easily, revealing not blood but a greenish ichor that flows sluggishly. The taste makes you retch at first, but then something shifts in your perception. It is not disgusting, it is nourishing, it is right. You hear singing, not the chittering of the things in your wounds, but something deeper, more resonant. A chorus of voices raised in joyful celebration, praising a name that makes your corrupted flesh tingle with recognition. Grandfather, father, papa. The syllables roll through your mind like warm honey, and you find yourself humming along, your ruined throat producing sounds that should not be possible. The melody is simple, childlike almost, but it carries weight beyond its apparent structure. It speaks of acceptance, of an end to struggle, of finding peace in decay. The transformation accelerates. Your right arm begins to show signs of the same corruption, new lesions erupting along its length with disturbing speed. Your legs feel weak, as though the bones themselves are softening, losing their structural integrity. When you try to stand, you collapse immediately, your limbs unable to support your weight. You lie there on the cold metal floor of the tunnel, staring up at nothing, and feel something fundamental shift inside you. Your mind, which has been fighting so desperately to maintain some semblance of its former structure, finally begins to slip. Not into madness exactly, but into something else, something that feels like opening your eyes after a long sleep. The manufacturum, the imperium, your life of endless labour and suffering, all of it, suddenly seems distant and unimportant. You see now that you have been clinging to pain, to fear, to the illusion that your struggle has meaning. But there is another way. There has always been another way. The thing in the darkness returns. You do not see it directly, but you sense its presence, vast and warm and deeply amused. It does not speak with words, but its meaning fills your corrupted mind nonetheless. You are being welcomed. You are being embraced. You are being remade into something better, something that will never again know the cold cruelty of the Imperium's indifference. All you must do is stop fighting. All you must do is accept the inevitable with grace and gratitude. Part of you, the part that still remembers the morning, prayers to the God Emperor, the part that recalls a life before this tunnel, screams in horror and denial. That voice grows fainter with each passing moment, drowned out by the singing, by the overwhelming sense of rightness that accompanies the corruption spreading through your body. You're dying, yes, but you're also being born. The two processes are not separate but intertwined. The death of what you are making space for what you will become. By the time 72 hours have elapsed since that first tickle in your throat, you barely resemble the labourer who walked into the manufactorum 3 days ago. Your body has bloated, the flesh swelling and distorting until your clothing has split entirely. The corruption covers you completely, a mottled landscape of pustules, lesions, and fungoid growths that pulse with their own internal rhythm. Your face has changed shape, the features softening and running together like melted wax. When you breathe, which happens less frequently now, the sound is wet and bubbling. You should be dead. By every measure of imperial medical knowledge, the degree of infection and tissue corruption you have suffered should have killed you within hours. Instead, you endure. More than endure, you thrive in your own twisted way. The fever has broken, not because the infection has passed, but because your body has accepted it, integrated it, made it part of your new baseline. You no longer feel cold or hot, pain or pleasure in any conventional sense. What you feel is a deep, abiding satisfaction, a sense of completion that you have never experienced in your entire wretched life. The singing grows louder, more insistent. It calls to you, urges you to rise, to move, to go forth and share this gift with others. The desire to do so overwhelms all other considerations. You have been given something precious, something that ends suffering and brings joy, and keeping it to yourself would be the height of selfishness. You begin to drag yourself toward the tunnel entrance, your transformed body moving in ways that defy the normal limitations of human anatomy. Each movement brings a wet, squelching sound, and you leave behind a trail of greenish slime that glows faintly in the darkness. As you reach the sealed door, you hear voices on the other side, security forces most likely tracking the source of the contamination that has begun spreading through the manufactorum's ventilation systems. They do not understand yet. They think this is something to be fought, to be purged with fire and fury. They will learn. They will all learn. You place your corrupted hand against the door, and the metal begins to corrode at your touch, rusting and flaking away with remarkable speed. The voices on the other side grow alarmed, then frightened, then silent. You push through the weakened barrier, emerging into the harsh light of the manufactorum's corridors. The security team stands there, weapons raised, faces twisted with horror behind. They're rebreathers. They open fire immediately, las bolts and solid rounds tearing into your transformed flesh. You barely feel the impacts. The corruption has rendered you largely immune to such crude attempts at harm. Where the rounds penetrate, they release sprays of that same greenish ichor, and wherever it lands, metal begins to corrode and flesh begins to rot. You move toward them, arms outstretched in a gesture of offering. They flee, their discipline breaking in the face of what you have become. You do not pursue with any urgency. There is no need. The corruption has already begun to spread through the manufactorum's atmospheric systems, carried on every breath, touching every surface. Within hours, others will begin to feel that first tickle in their throats. Within days, the entire facility will know the joy you have discovered. The thought fills you with a warmth that has nothing to do with fever. You are, in your own way, content. The struggle has ended. The pain has ceased. You have found acceptance in decay, peace in corruption, and belonging in the embrace of something far greater than yourself. The person you were 72 hours ago is gone, unmourned and unremembered. What remains is something new, something that giggles at the absurdity of existence and finds beauty in entropy. You are blessed. You are chosen. You are one of Grandfather's children now, and that makes all the difference. The manufactorum's corridors stretch before you in ways that make no sense. You remember this place, the geometric precision of its construction, the ruthless efficiency of its design, everything arranged to maximize production and minimize wasted space. Now the walls seem to breathe, their metal surfaces pulsing with a rhythm that matches something deep in your transformed chest. The overhead lumens flicker and dim as you pass beneath them, as though the light itself recoils from your presence. You do not blame it. If you could still recoil from yourself, you would. The security team's screams have faded into the distance, replaced by a different sound. The Manufactorum's life support systems groan and wheeze, struggling to filter the corruption that now saturates the atmosphere. You can hear it spreading through the ventilation ducts, a wet slithering sound accompanied by the buzz of flies. Grandfather's gifts travel on wings both literal and metaphorical, and this facility with its thousands of workers packed into confined spaces represents fertile ground for his blessings. By dawn, perhaps half the workers will feel that first tickle in their throats. By dusk, the Manufactorum will belong to him entirely. You move through the facility with purpose, born from something beyond conscious thought. The person you were would have fled, sought extraction, attempted to reach the planetary authorities. That person is gone, dissolved into the corruption that has remade you from the inside out. What remains understands its role with perfect clarity. You are a vector, a carrier, a living sermon on the futility of resistance. Every surface you touch corrodes. Every breath you exhale carries microscopic gifts. You're not destroying this place. You're improving it, freeing it from the cold tyranny of function and replacing it with the warm embrace of decay. The first workers you encounter are third-shift maintenance personnel, emerging from a service access point with toolkits and data slates. They see you and freeze, their minds struggling to process the impossibility before them. You were human hours ago. The security footage would confirm it if anyone bothered to check. Now you resemble something that shambled out of a nightmare. Your body swollen and distorted, your clothing hanging in rotted tatters, your flesh a canvas of corruption. One of them drops his toolkit. The sound of metal hitting metal echoes through the corridor. You reach for them, not with malice, but with an almost paternal affection. They need to understand. They need to feel what you have felt, to experience the liberation that comes when suffering finally ends. Your hand closes around the nearest worker's wrist, and you feel the moment the infection transfers. It is not violent or painful. If anything, it feels like a kiss, a gentle touch that carries profound implications. The worker gasps, his eyes widening as the first tremors of fever begin. You release him and move to the next, spreading grandfather's love with the methodical efficiency this place once demanded of its labourers. They do not run immediately. The infection has that effect, a brief window where the mind recognizes that something fundamental has changed, but has not yet processed the full horror of transformation. They stand there, swaying slightly, hands moving to touch the points where your corrupted flesh made contact with theirs. Small lesions are already forming, tiny pinpricks of grey-green discoloration that will spread with astonishing speed. By the time their conscious minds catch up with their body's transformation, it will be far too late for flight to matter. You leave them there and continue your journey deeper into the Manufactorum. The facility operates on multiple levels, connected by vast elevator shafts and service stairwells. You choose the stairs, not from any strategic consideration, but because the elevator's machine spirit recoils from you, refusing to answer its call button. The stairwell is narrow and poorly lit, designed for emergency evacuation rather than regular use. Your transformed body navigates it with surprising grace despite its bulk, finding handholds on surfaces that should not support weight, your movements fluid in ways that defy your apparent mass. As you descend, you become aware of others moving through the Manufactorum, not the living, but those who have already begun their transformations. You can sense them, feel them through some connection that transcends physical proximity. The workers you, infected in the corridor above, have begun to spread, their bodies already changing, their minds sliding into that peculiar state where consciousness remains but control dissolves. They move with the same purposeful shambling that drives you, each following their own path through the facility, each touching and infecting everyone they encounter. The hive mind is not what you expected. Imperial propaganda speaks of such things in terms of domination and loss of self, the individual subsumed into a collective that strips away identity and free will. What you experience feels different. You remain yourself, or at least you remain aware of being yourself. Your thoughts continue in their own channels, your perceptions filtered through your own consciousness. But beneath that individual awareness runs a deeper current, a connection to every other infected soul in this facility. You know where they are, not through sight or sound, but through some sense that has no name. You feel their joy, their relief, their gradual surrender to the inevitable. The feeling is intoxicating. For your entire life, you've been alone, locked inside your skull with only your own thoughts for company. Even among crowds, even pressed shoulder to shoulder in the hab blocks or on the production lines, you have been fundamentally isolated. Every human being a sealed box, unknowable and separate. Now those walls have dissolved. You are part of something larger, something that encompasses hundreds of minds moving toward thousands. The loneliness that has defined your existence simply ceases to be. On the third sub-level, you encounter organized resistance, a squad of PDF troopers, hastily mobilized and equipped with flamers and hazmat suits. They have established a choke point in one of the main corridors, using overturned equipment as makeshift barricades. Their officer shouts orders, his voice muffled by his sealed helmet. You can smell his fear even through the filtration systems, a sharp, acrid scent that mingles with the rot spreading through your transformed body. They open fire as soon as you come into view. The flames wash over you, intense heat that should carbonize flesh and boil bodily fluids. You feel it, register the sensation of burning, but pain does not accompany the experience. Your corrupted tissue blackens and splits, releasing clouds of spores that scatter on the superheated air. Where the flames touch, the infection accelerates rather than being destroyed. The fire carries your gifts deeper into the facility, through air ducts and along cable runs, reaching spaces you could never physically access. The officer realizes his mistake a heartbeat too late. He tries to order his squad to cease fire, but several of them are already coughing, already feeling the first effects of contamination. You walk through the flames toward them. Not quickly, there is no need for speed, but with inexorable purpose. Your body continues to burn, but it also continues to function. Nurgle's gifts do not require intact biology in any conventional sense. You are as much demon as flesh now, sustained by forces that transcend metabolic processes. The PDF troopers break and run, abandoning their barricade, their training forgotten in the face of something their imperial indoctrination never prepared them for. You let them go. They will spread the infection further, carry it to their commanders and medical stations, seed it throughout the planetary defense network. The Manufactorum's central processing core lies at the facility's heart, a vast chamber filled with cogitators and data processing equipment, tended by armies of tech adepts and servitors. This is where production quotas are calculated, where supply chains are managed, where the cold logic of imperial efficiency reduces human lives to variables in equations of maximum output. You emerge into this space through a maintenance access, and immediately every alarm in the facility begins to scream. The tech adepts react with surprising coordination. They have protocols for contamination events, procedures drilled into them through decades of service. Bulkhead doors slam shut, dividing the chamber into isolated sections. Cleansing fires erupt from concealed nozzles, filling the air with purifying flame. Servitors advance in perfect formation, their augmetic limbs bristling with cutting tools and flamers. For a moment you think they might actually succeed in containing you. Then the machine spirits begin to die, not quickly, not cleanly, but with a slow corrupting failure that mirrors your own transformation. The Manufactorum's systems have been operating for centuries, their code and circuitry intertwined in ways that no living tech priest fully understands. The corruption does not destroy this delicate balance. Instead, it reinterprets it, finding new purpose in decay. Cogitators begin calculating production quotas for entirely different products. Data streams redirect, sending false reports to orbital stations and planetary authorities. The Manufactorum itself becomes an accomplice in its own transformation. The servitors hesitate, their simple programming unable to cope with conflicting directives from corrupted systems. Some continue their advance, but others simply stop, standing motionless as their cybernetic components begin to rust and fail. The tech adepts flee, abandoning their posts, their augmented minds recoiling from the wrongness spreading through the systems they serve. You watch them go with something approaching sympathy. They have spent their lives in service to the Omnissiah, maintaining the machines that maintain the Imperium. Now those machines are learning to sing different hymns. You spend hours in the central core not doing anything specific, simply existing within its space. Your presence is enough. The corruption spreads through circuits and code, through physical components and data streams, rewriting the facility's fundamental purpose from the inside out. By morning, the manufactorum will appear functional from orbit. It will transmit the expected reports, maintain the expected production schedules, respond to the expected queries. But everything it produces will carry Grandfather's blessings. Every shipment sent off-world will seed new infections. The facility has become a Trojan horse, hiding its true nature behind a facade of imperial compliance. The other infected begin to gather. You sense them converging on the central core, drawn by the same unspoken imperative that guided you here. They shamble in through access points and broken bulkheads, a growing crowd of transformed workers and security personnel. Some are further along in their transformations than others. A few still resemble their former selves, corruption limited to small patches of discoloured flesh and minor swellings. Others have progressed to the point where their humanity is barely recognisable, their bodies grotesque sculptures of distended tissue and fungoid growth. What strikes you most forcefully is that they are all still aware. You can see it in their eyes, those that still have eyes in any conventional sense. The consciousness remains, trapped inside corrupted flesh, experiencing every moment of their transformation with perfect clarity. Imperial propaganda teaches that the forces of chaos strip away the soul, reducing humans to mindless vessels. But Nurgle's gifts are more subtle, more cruel. The mind remains intact, fully capable of understanding what is happening, simply unable to control the body's actions or halt its corruption. You remember reading, in some half-forgotten lesson from your youth, about a disease from ancient terror called rabies. An infected human would feel thirst but be unable to drink, their body rejecting water despite the mind's desperate need. The poxwalker condition is similar but far more comprehensive. Your mind screams for you to stop, to resist, to fight against the corruption spreading through your flesh. Your body ignores these commands entirely, moving according to different imperatives, following purposes that originate from something far older and far more powerful than your individual will. The gathering in the central core becomes a congregation. No one speaks in any conventional sense, though sounds emerge from corrupted throats. Wet gurgling, the buzz of flies, the whisper of spores releasing into air. But beneath these physical sounds runs something else. A psychic communication that bypasses language entirely. You share sensations, impressions, fragments of the joy you all feel despite the horror. There is a hymn being sung, though no lips move to form the words. It speaks of acceptance, of rest after long struggle, of finally laying down burdens that have become too heavy to bear. The manufactorum's remaining uninfected population attempts one final stand in the upper levels. You feel their presence through the corrupted facility systems, watch their preparations through sensors that now serve different masters. They have barricaded themselves in the main assembly hall, several thousand workers and overseers armed with improvised weapons and desperate determination. They pray to the God Emperor, their voices rising in traditional hymns of protection and deliverance. The sound drifts down through the facility's air systems, reaching your corrupted ears as a distant echo. The prayers do not work, not because the Emperor does not hear them, though you suspect he does not, but because prayer alone cannot halt physical contagion. The infection has been spreading through the ventilation systems for hours, touching every corner of the facility. Those barricaded in the assembly hall have been breathing contaminated air since before they even knew to be afraid. They are already infected. They simply do not know it yet. You do not lead the assault on the assembly hall. Leadership implies hierarchy, organization, the imposition of will from above. The gathering of poxwalkers that climbs toward the upper levels operates on different principles. You are a swarm, a tide, a living wave of corruption that flows through the facility with the mindless determination of water-seeking low ground. No individual directs the movement. No one gives orders or coordinates tactics. Yet the mass moves with perfect efficiency, flowing around obstacles, spreading to engulf any pockets of resistance, consolidating into a crushing weight wherever opposition concentrates. The barricades fall within minutes, not through superior force or tactical brilliance, but through simple inevitability. The defenders are already coughing, already feeling fever spreading through their bodies, already noticing the first lesions forming on their skin. They fight anyway, because what else can they do? They swing their improvised weapons, set fires, try desperately to stem the tide with courage and determination. It makes no difference. You cannot fight a disease with anger. You cannot intimidate a virus with threats. The infection takes them, one by one, until the defenders become the infected and the infected join the swarm. By dawn, the Manufactorum belongs entirely to Nurgle. 8,000 souls transformed in a single night, 8,000 new voices added to the growing chorus. The facility continues to operate, its production lines still moving, its systems still processing data. But everything has changed in ways that satellites and orbital stations cannot detect. The manufactured goods now carry microscopic gifts. The data streams now contain corrupted code. The Manufactorum has become a weapon aimed at the broader Imperium, hiding in plain sight, patient and inexorable in its purpose. You stand in what was once your hab block, staring at the narrow space where you slept between shifts. The mattress shows the stains of your sweated fever. The crude altar to the God Emperor sits in the corner, its devotional candles long since burned out. You remember the person who lived here, who prayed at that altar, who believed in the Imperium's eternal strength. That person seems impossibly distant now, separated from you not by time but by the fundamental gulf between what you were and what you have become. Some part of you screams, buried deep beneath the corruption, beneath the psychic connection to the gathering swarm, beneath the strange joy that fills your transformed flesh. A core of human consciousness remains. It screams without sound, howls without voice, fights against the inevitable, with the fury of something facing its own extinction. This screaming fragment understands with perfect clarity that you have become everything you were taught to fear and hate. You are the enemy. You are corruption made manifest. You are the reason entire worlds burn rather than risk contamination spreading beyond containment. The screaming changes nothing. Your body continues its transformation regardless of whether your buried consciousness consents. Your flesh continues to swell and corrupt, sprouting new growths, developing new mutations. The horn-like protrusions that characterize advanced poxwalkers begin to emerge from your skull, pushing through the skin with a sensation that should be agonizing but registers only as pressure. Your fingers fuse together in places, forming crude clubs more suitable for bashing than manipulating. Your face continues to run and melt, features sliding into a permanent rictus grin that has nothing to do with actual emotion. The planetary authorities respond with predictable efficiency. Orbital bombardment begins at midday, lance strikes and mass drivers reducing sections of the Manufactorum to molten slag. They are following proper protocol, attempting to cauterize the infection before it spreads beyond containment. The strikes kill thousands of poxwalkers, including many you shared consciousness with through the growing psychic network. You feel each death as a distant echo, a connection severed, a voice falling silent in the chorus. The deaths mean nothing. For every poxwalker destroyed, a dozen more emerge from hiding in the facility's deeper levels. The infection has spread beyond the Manufactorum itself, carried by fleeing workers in those first hours before the lockdown could be established. PDF troopers who engaged the initial outbreak brought contamination back to their barracks. Medical personnel treating the first patients became patients themselves. The Manufactorum was never the true target. It was merely the ignition point for something far larger. You survive the orbital bombardment through luck more than design. The section of the facility where you shelter is struck by debris from a collapsing structure rather than direct fire. The impact buries you under tons of twisted metal and rockreat, crushing your transformed body beneath a weight that would flatten any normal human. You do not die. The corruption sustaining you operates according to different rules. Your bones shatter and your organs rupture, but your consciousness persists, trapped in the prison of your own ruined flesh. Days pass, or perhaps weeks. Time becomes difficult to track in the absolute darkness beneath the rubble. Your body attempts to repair itself, but the results are grotesque even by Nurgle standards. Bones knit back together at wrong angles. Organs regenerate in configurations that bear little resemblance to their original forms. You become aware of new growths emerging from your flesh, fungoid structures that feed on the decay spreading through your buried body. Eventually, you realize you're not healing. You're composting, breaking down into raw material from which something else will grow. The thought brings a strange peace. You have served your purpose as a vector, spreading grandfather's gifts to thousands, who will in turn spread them to millions. Now you will serve a different purpose, becoming nutrients for the garden. There is symmetry in this, a completeness that satisfies something deep in your fragmenting consciousness. Everything returns to the soil eventually. Everything feeds the next generation. In decay there is no waste, no loss, only transformation from one form into another. You hear singing, not through ears, which may no longer function, but through some other sense that bypasses physical anatomy entirely. The chorus of poxwalkers continues throughout the planet, growing stronger with each passing day. The Manufactorum's destruction was futile. The infection has spread to 3 other facilities, 7 hab blocks, and the planetary capital's water treatment center. Within a month, the entire world will belong to Nurgle. Within a year, the infection will spread to neighboring systems, carried by merchant vessels and refugee ships fleeing the contamination. Your consciousness begins to fragment. Not from physical trauma, though your body has suffered enough to kill you 1,000 times over, but from the simple impossibility of remaining individual while being absorbed into something so much larger. The person you were, with your memories and experiences and sense of distinct identity, dissolves like salt in water. You do not disappear. You transform, becoming part of the chorus rather than a single voice within it. The distinction between you and the swarm blurs, then vanishes entirely. In your final moments of individual awareness, you understand what has happened. The infection was never really about spreading disease. Disease was merely the mechanism, the physical vector for something far more profound. What Nurgle offers is not corruption, but completion, not destruction, but transformation. The Imperium teaches that individual humans matter, that each soul has value, that death represents a failure to be mourned. But Grandfather knows different truths. Individual suffering matters less than collective joy. The boundaries between self and other are illusions to be dissolved. Death is not an ending but a transition, no more tragic than autumn following summer. You let go. The struggle that has defined your last 72 hours finally ceases. The screaming core of human consciousness that fought so desperately against corruption falls silent, not from defeat, but from acceptance. You understand now why the other infected appeared almost joyful in their transformation. There is profound relief in surrendering control, in accepting that you were never really in charge of your own existence anyway. The Imperium placed you in this manufactorum, directed your labour, determined the conditions of your life down to the smallest detail. At least Nurgle's domination comes with the promise of belonging. The darkness beneath the rubble becomes absolute. Your body completes its transformation into something that is no longer alive in any meaningful sense, but has not yet fully crossed into death. You exist in the liminal space between, consciousness persisting without the biological machinery that normally sustains it. Time stretches, contracts, loses coherence. You drift in and out of awareness, sometimes perceiving the world around you, sometimes sinking into dreams that may be memories or may be visions of futures that have not yet arrived. When they finally dig you out, months or years later, you do not remember who you were. The name you once answered to has been forgotten. The life you lived before the infection exists only as fragmentary impressions, no more substantial than morning mist. What emerges from the rubble is something that was once human, but has travelled so far beyond that origin point that the connection has become purely academic. You are Poxwalker now, nothing more and nothing less. A weapon in Grandfather's arsenal, a voice in his endless chorus, a small piece of the great work of entropy that will eventually claim the entire galaxy. You shamble forth into the light, your body a grotesque monument to decay, your mind a fragment of its former self trapped in corrupted flesh. Behind you, the remains of the Manufactorum continue to breed new infections, new transformations, new additions to the growing swarm. Ahead lies a galaxy of uncountable trillions, each one a potential convert, each one carrying within them the seeds of their own corruption. You move toward them with the patience of entropy itself, knowing that time always favours decay, that all things eventually return to Grandfather's garden. 72 hours from infection to transformation. 72 hours to lose everything you were and become something you never imagined. 72 hours that stretch across the rest of your existence, which may last days or centuries depending on when final destruction finds you. You are blessed. You are cursed. You are damned. You are saved. In Nurgle's embrace, these distinctions cease to have meaning. There is only the endless now of decay, the eternal present of corruption, the gift that keeps on giving until the stars themselves grow cold and the universe slides into its final entropic silence. The Manufactorum was just the beginning. The planet will fall. The system will fall. Eventually, if Grandfather is patient enough, the galaxy itself will fall. And you will be there, shambling through the ruins, spreading joy through rot, offering liberation through corruption. You cannot remember why this should horrify you. You cannot recall what it felt like to be truly human. All you know is the singing, the sweet rot smell of home, and the absolute certainty that you're exactly where you belong.